Hey y'all, how we doing? Shout out to Bear Nation for tuning in for another episode of the Bear Necessities of Entrepreneurship, a podcast for the entrepreneur-minded, created by entrepreneurs, discussing the real stories that give you the tools to overcome challenges and stay true to your real self. As always, I want to give a shout out to our partners over at Fin. Fin is a social good platform that creates employee engagement and builds culture. We've teamed up with Fin to give back to the communities that we serve. For every episode, we will be donating $10 to the cause of choosing by our guest in the Fin platform. Enjoy today's episode. What up, Bear Nation? How are we doing today? We are back for another episode of the Bear Necessities of Entrepreneurship podcast. And today, I have an amazing guest who I'm pretty sure is just me in another body in another life, because we're that similar, which you'll hear from time to time as we go out. My guest today is Brian Burkhart, who is the chief word guy, who it's going to get into what the chief word guy means at SquarePlanet. He has his own podcast, Square Stories, which I happen to be a guest on, coming up soon at some point. Check it out. But his mission is to elevate people. This is why we're so aligned. And we're going to get into this. His mission is to elevate people. And he does that by making waves in communications. He's a sales presentation guru, a keynote presenter, a best-selling author, podcast host, and a person who really digs orange Lego cufflinks. And for my viewers that are on YouTube, he is rocking those cufflinks. Brian, say hello to Bear Nation for me.
Rob, how are you, bud? It's good to see you. Thanks for that very kind intro. Always fun to hang with you.
I'm excited. The only thing that we have to give Brian a little pause for, and it's okay, he is a Bears fan. You know, that Bears helmet in the background.
Hey, this is the Bear Necessities podcast.
I know, it's too perfect. It is too perfect, even though, you know, we have this thing going being a Kansas City Chiefs fan. So when Brian and I first met and had our first conversation, a 30-minute call to get to know each other about business. And we talked for damn near 29 minutes about football, about 1 minute of business.
29. I mean, it was like, hi, let's talk football. And that's all we did. It was great.
Pretty much. And then we're like, okay, let's actually set up a business conversation. So we had another call a week later to actually talk about what we do and all these other things. And we also found a lot of similarities from the book that he wrote to the book I'm writing to what we do in the podcast world. So Brian, this is all about entrepreneurship, and you've been an entrepreneur. You've started multiple businesses. Why don't you kind of give us the high-level version of where the hell did entrepreneurship for you start, and what did that look like before we even get into what you're doing today as the chief word guy?
You got it. I would tell you, Rob, that first and foremost, it all starts with the notion that business communications is broken. It really is. If you think about it, it's just so painful often for all of us, whether it's on a receiving end, certainly a creation end. It's just tough sometimes to communicate. I can say that now as well into my elder stages of life guy, but it really all started for me when I was 10. I was running for student council president at a elementary school in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. I stood in front of my whole class, my whole school, teachers, parents, all the kids. And I knew in that moment that I was going to win. And it was one of those kind of things. It's not me being braggadocious. What it was I finally found something that I was like, wow, I'm better at this than most people. Wasn't the best athlete, wasn't the greatest student, certainly had no artistic talent, but I could communicate a little bit. And when I stood in front of that whole room, it really ultimately changed the trajectory of my life, shaped my career forward. And in many ways, that notion of understanding rhetoric and persuasion, it's the journey that I've been on ever since. I got really, really into the notion of running my own business when I was in my kind of mid-late 20s. I was working for a guy in a company. My boss was the founder of the firm. I literally had my office inside his office. I was a complete plebe grunt. And I saw what he was doing in the meeting convention sort of space. And I thought, that I can do, but I can do that better my way. And it was a shift towards content versus sort of the AV and entertainment side of that business. And that's really where it all started. I ended up being in partnership with my dad for a bunch of years until I had to let him go. That's right. I fired my dad. That was very challenging. And then since then, I've had a number of businesses with a number of partners, and SquarePlanet's been all me all since, but it's real. It's something. It really is.
I love that. So you fired your father. What you mentioned that was kind of hard, but as we look at entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship is all about making hard decisions sometimes. So let's kind of, throw it out there. Let's talk about what was the decisioning behind the reason. I mean, I worked for my dad, and I don't know if I could ever have fired my dad. My dad's also like bigger than me and scary, which is saying something. So what was that? How did that come to light? And what was obviously probably a good reasoning behind it from a business perspective? Why don't you walk us through that a little bit? Because that's a challenge that so many entrepreneurs face, is letting people go and changing the business around a little bit.
No doubt. And it's a really important lesson for entrepreneurs. And I say I fired my dad, and that's really not fair, because it was a conversation that ultimately led to a departure. What was going on was we were really in very different stages of life. He was not an old guy, but he was certainly well into his career. I was still relatively young, but I had just gotten married. And for the first time in my life, I stopped and thought, what about me? What's my take on all of this? And we had really, really very unequally, if that's a word, divided things. And so he was making, way, 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 way more, and getting all kinds of retirement benefits. And I was basically getting zip. And yet at the same time, I was doing the majority of the work. And so it was one of those kind of, it's one of those typical partnership, entrepreneurship kind of things where it just wasn't equal on all levels. And I came to him and said, I think one of us needs to go. You take your clients, I'll take mine. We'll be fast friends and all will be well. And we agreed that ultimately meant he was going to just be done. And so when I say fired, that's a very strong way of really kind of telling the tale. Ultimately, we made a decision and he walked. Here's the lesson, though, for entrepreneurs. We had no partnership agreement. We had not done a good job of clearly defining roles and expectations. At no point did we talk about the distribution of income and residual dollars based on performance. We left all of this stuff to become problematic. And what I learned going forward from that is you got to do your best effort. Dad and son, partner to partner, you name it. You got to talk that stuff out. And if people don't, you get in the situation I did. And to my dad's credit, thankfully, he was able to be graceful and kind, and it's all fine today, many, many years later, but it could have been awful.
Could have been. I think that's something that I find very important to talk about, in the fact that we actually have, there's an episode with John Lynn where we talk a little bit about partnerships and the need for that, because I started a business with a very good friend of mine, Half Day Group, with a very good friend of mine. I was one of the best men in his wedding recently. And, we have this business that we're still operating. And when we started our business together, I came in to sit down and we were talking, and he had written me like a 5-page front and back letter discussing things that he wanted to cover both personally and professionally. And the goal behind that was to make sure that when we walked into this partnership, what was personal stayed personal, what was professional stayed professional. We line itemed everything. And there were times when we had to have conversations that were hard as hell, but they were business. And we walk out, then we wouldn't let it affect our personal relationships. It wasn't always easy. It's something that I've learned from a young age because I worked for my father, and my dad taught me that a long time. Hey, when I yell at you at work, it's because you're doing something wrong. It's not personal. And we'd walk out the door and he would put his arm around me and say something. And it's hey, in there, that was work. That's money, that's time. That's what you get paid to do. And I learned at an early age, which is so hard in partnerships, because oh, let's just start a business with a friend. And you don't define anything. And that's where problems arise. And you've seen that kind of a couple different times, right? You've had a couple different partners that you've done business with. So what it means to set expectations. And some partnerships aren't meant to last. They're good for a while, but at some point there could be a shelf life to it.
1,000% right. And just recently, within the last number of months, I proactively dissolved another partnership, a firm that we've had for a bunch of years and did really, really well. We were killing it. And it just became one of those things where the core beliefs of the two partners just got very, very different. And it can be troublesome. good news is, I think, I've been at this long enough to understand there are a variety of ways to attack. You don't want to let resentment and pain boil up. You want to attack way before that's the prevailing feeling or notion. And so when this particular partnership kind of came to an end just a few months ago, it was a wildly loving, almost cathartic kind of experience where we were on a Zoom together and it was like, dude, I love you, man. And, you know, I want only the best for you, but I think it's time for us to go separate directions. And that mutual feeling, give it time, let resentment kick in. And it's very different words. And so it's understanding how it all works, but really being mindful. And what you did with your partner, talking it out in advance, that is the key. And then constantly talking about it. Things change. You can't just set it and forget it. You got to go back and look and make sure that you're on the same page.
Absolutely. I think we did kind of like a quarterly, like we'd go grab drinks together and we just, I mean, pandemic was different, but we'd grab a drink. We'd just sit down like, hey, here's what we're working on. Here's what we own. Here's what you own. Here's what I own. And there were times in conversation, like we were making decisions and I had to stop and be like, yo, like, this is what I do. Like, this is my purview, or, hey, this is my thought, but like ultimately, like I'm going to back your play 100% because that is what your job is. And I know that I don't know it as well as you, but I'm going to support you 100%. And sometimes I didn't always agree with what the course of action, but I knew that that was what was needed to be done for the business. I mean, I would say that in the fact of like 99.9% of the time, I always believed in the course of action. There's like that 0.01% where I was like, yo, I would have done it this way, but you know, but I think that's really important when we think about entrepreneurship. Because now, as you've dissolved a number of partnerships, you're a solopreneur right now. Very different lifestyle than starting a business and having 3 co-founders and a whole big team. So when we think about entrepreneurship and your different stages of your career, what have you found to be the key, the biggest lesson that you've had to learn to manage so many different successful businesses and deal with the highs and lows of running a business? So what was that about you or that skill that you've had to learn to manage that and handle those conversations?
This is a big question. I can say right now, SquarePlanet right now has a grand total of 4 employees. Huge, monster size firm, right? I mean, we let a bunch of people go in 2020. Things have come and gone. Our size has certainly been like waves. We've had our highs and our lows. The thing that's been perhaps most unique, most insightful, most alarming to me as an owner is that it's always my fault. It's always my fault. If things go right, things go bad, somewhere in the middle, it's always my fault. And I think owning that, not just to me, but very publicly. I mean, everyone, all 4 of us here, and before that even, people have heard me on the record consistently say, it's my fault. If something happens, you just have to own it. And I think lots of entrepreneurs and certainly CEOs of big companies, boy, they want to blame everyone else. And that's just a load of bupkis. You just can't. The buck stops here. And the good news is, I think when there's a problem, I'm quick to own it. And when there is praise, I'm quick to pass that along. To me, I think the thing that's so true is how important really amazing employees are. We've been really lucky at SquarePlanet. We've had some incredible people through this place, still do. And so that just makes me look good every time I hire wisely because they're amazing. They make it all go. And if you don't publicly praise people, that's a mistake. And if you don't take the blame, that's a mistake. So I think that's probably the number one lesson.
You know, there's a word that gets thrown around, accountability. We talk about it and it's used a lot and it's on every poster and everything, but it's so hard to be accountable, to hold yourself accountable when it comes to failures, businesses.
I think it's easy.
Challenges.
I really do. I don't think it's hard at all. I think it's just a decision you get to make as an owner, as a founder. You get to say, yeah, it's up to me. If it all goes to hell, it's my fault. It's just a simple choice. And, you know, there's a lot of things that it could even be somewhat existential. If I had done this, if I had hired this person, if I had made this, then maybe it's still your fault. At the end of the day, it's still your fault. And so I don't think it's difficult to be accountable at all. I really don't.
Well, I agree with you. And I bring that up because I literally was doing a bunch of research on accountability. And I posted about this a while ago, because the other big word that we hear a lot about in entrepreneurship, I think is really cliche, is adaptability, right?
Yeah.
About being adaptable. Oh, we're adaptable, overcome. But you see so many times, oh, the market did this on us, our employees did that. It's like, well, where's adaptability and accountability come into that?
I'll
Right?
tell
You
you a
made those
story.
decisions, and go ahead.
You'll appreciate this. So this is maybe a decade ago. We were at our old office,
Mhm.
and I was working on a project that was very creative yet custom video based.
Mhm.
And I had all kinds of people come into my office. And as a kind of executive producer, creative director, the guy in charge of thinking what it's going to be like, I wanted to run my idea past this group of people that would help execute it. I had camera operators and video editors and animators and writers and all these people. And as I'm going around the room, listening to their feedback to my idea in the moment, very much like right then and there, I realized that I didn't really want their feedback. What I wanted was them to go, good idea, Brian. That's what we're going to do. I wanted them to just agree.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was a couple of things. One, that moment, that kind of flash, I really wasn't adaptable. I was just saying, this is what we were going to do. And I wasn't actively listening. That's very negative. And then two, even though I was in the position of being kind of the boss, I was acting as if it was my job to have them agree with me and all was well and do this sort of banana republic.
Yeah.
I didn't really want their feedback. And so it was almost as if I was anti-democratic.
Mhm.
Those kind of moments of insight, they fundamentally changed me. Now, I still get to have full veto power. I am still the boss. And so having that in the reserve chute is a good thing. But leading with it, that is like the least adaptable thing you can do. Letting people be experts, letting them have opinions and be amazing because they are, is the really right thing to do. And then if you've got a veto, do it.
Yeah.
I learned a lot that day. And it was just one of those moments that has stuck with me since.
I love that because it kind of goes into the core of what being an entrepreneur is all about, is knowing how to hold yourself accountable on a regular basis, how to be adaptable, the difference between feedback and validation. So what you're looking for is validation that this is all good. And very rarely do you get that, because you're supposed to be hiring people smarter than you to fill in your gaps, right? And that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing as an entrepreneur. So I love that. I love that story because it doesn't leave you. And when you know that and you start living that, it's one of those things that you can see over time. And maybe this kind of goes along the vein, but what would you tell? So if you were starting your life over again to be an entrepreneur today, what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self to starting out to be an entrepreneur?
I love this question, and I really hope people take this to heart. It's easy to listen to podcasts like this or subject matter experts in any kind of environment and hear this, but then do nothing with it. Mm-hmm. Please, folks, if you're listening, be action-oriented. Here's what I would tell you. If I could go back in time, the number one thing I would do is I would take real deep introspection into my own bad self to figure out what it is that I stand for, what my core beliefs are. Things like being accountable. That is a core belief. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I am in charge. Whether we win, lose, or draw, it is up to me. And that kind of notion, that is a core belief that I then bring to the party into all of the actions that happen here at SquarePlanet and my other businesses. The reality is that core beliefs are incredibly, incredibly hard. If you take 10 people, line them up and say, tell me what you stand for, you're going to get a lot of crap, a lot of stuff that's not really a core belief. It's just parroted notions of things they've stolen from other people. People don't take the time to stop and codify the things they stand for. The reason it matters, Rob, is that beliefs lead to actions. If you believe your body is a temple, there's a pretty good likelihood you're going to eat right and work out, et cetera, et cetera. If you believe sushi is horrible, awful, nasty, slimy stuff, you're going to go eat pizza or pasta or a steak, but not sushi. Mm-hmm. Your beliefs lead to your actions. As an entrepreneur, you're going to be tasked with a variety of things. Mm-hmm. It would be great to know that the actions you take are the right ones. Mm-hmm. And that flows from understanding your core belief. Here at SquarePlanet, it's about elevating people. That's something that I, as a human, but as a firm, we take wildly seriously. And so when I give actionable feedback, when I help someone with a presentation, when I work with a founder or a CEO or someone on something that's going to really deeply matter, because remember, business communications is broken. When I'm fixing them, I'm not beating on them. I'm not a big dick. I'm elevating them. I'm giving tools and resources to be better. And that's a conscious decision of what way I'm going to come into that party. I could be a big raging Simon Cowell-like jerk. That's an option. Yeah. But that would go against our core belief of elevating people. And so I'm not going to beat around the bush. You're not going to get a bunch of lies. I'm not going to tell you you're great. Yeah. But I am going to be kind when I say, well, that could be improved upon, and here's how we're going to do it. So knowing what you stand for, by far and away, that's the number one thing I would go back a while ago, 20 years or so, and say, man, let me figure this out. Let me know what it is that I stand for.
You know, I feel that on such a deep level for somebody who's had, you know, non-linear career path and have gone through different phases of my life. I've always had some core beliefs of what I believe to be truth and what I stand for, but I don't think I've ever truly believed and lived them out until the last really year or so, when it kind of clicked into, you know, curiosity, intentionality, authenticity, right? These different things that we talk about. And as those kind of clarified for me, I feel like even more so now than ever, it's living those out. And, you know, I think that's a great piece of advice to tell your younger self. So
it's,
we talk,
of course, easier said than done.
Always.
And certainly you can do it at any stage in life. There's no regrets if this has not happened at an early stage. Yeah. At any point you can jump in and really deduce with deep clarity what it is that you stand for. And it can actually be a hell of a lot of fun. This might sound a little crazy, but my wife is a psychotherapist and an executive business coach, and she's amazing. She's unbelievable. And she's got this kind of 3-part mantra of beauty, love, and adventure. Her whole reason for life is to find beauty, love, and adventure in everything she does. And that can mean things like a new Thai restaurant opened. Awesome. That's an adventure. Let's try a new place. It might be beautiful inside and kind of fulfill her needs that way. And it might be an act of love for me to book a reservation and say, babe, we're going on Friday night to this new joint. It's one of those kind of things where beauty, love, and adventure doesn't mean Botox and a month on the Seychelles. It's really about finding little things in life. And that's her reason. It's her value prop. It's her standing for something stuff. People, this is not easy, but boy, oh boy, it can be life-changing. You just have to take the time to go do it. Absolutely.
And I think, too, when you talk about those things, you know, mine are curiosity, intentionality, authenticity, attitude, effort, right?
That's pretty big.
That is, but those are also all small little things that you can do on a daily basis. And now it's a conscious effort, right, to have a good attitude and to give great effort every day. But when you work to those things, you're going to more often than not have a good attitude and give great effort, and you're going to live with curiosity, intentionality, and authenticity, right? And you're building towards that, right? Elevating people. Every step that we do is elevating somebody in some way. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be roses, but it's the little things. It doesn't need to be this big mantra and like 10 steps down the road. It can be daily things. That's what's hard about it, is that it's daily things that you have to work at. And that's also why I think it's fulfilling. Right. In its most purest form, which leads me into this piece of when we talk about core beliefs into action. And you've mentioned a couple of times that communication is broken. So I kind of want to take this transition over into what you're doing today with SquarePlanet, calling yourself the chief word guy. Tell me a little about what that means and what does communication mean in today's age? I mean, we're in a very hyper-connected digital society. We have Gen Z entering the workforce. We're coming out of a pandemic, so the future of work is changing. So let's talk about, to entrepreneurs out there, as we communicate our beliefs, what do we stand for, our values, our companies, our product, our service. Where does that all start?
Well, that's a heck of a question that is big, of course. And I'm going to pick on you. And so please forgive me. You're 4 times my size. Don't hurt me, Rob. But things like the core beliefs that you did a hell of a job of rattling off, those are very impressive, very powerful words, but they can be too cumbersome for others to go, Yep. Got it. Remember, done, good, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're a person who, like me, loves to stand on a stage and speak to people.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you transformed your words into something as simple as, hi, I'm Rob, and I believe in stacking bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd kind of give you that puzzled look. But really, you would then go on to say, the bricks that I'm talking about are authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
And when stacked together, all of a sudden you leave an intentional life full of purpose that gives you exactly what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It's also an impenetrable wall. It's the stuff that holds me up. It defends me against those that see it another way. You're basically crafting a narrative around your core beliefs, but in a far easier way for people to comprehend. Mm-hmm. So in many ways, what I just did on the fly right there, I'd love time to wordsmith that for you, but on the fly, what I just did, that's my life. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. All the presentations that we build for our clients, all the work that we help both sales firms like organization wide, enterprise level kind of stuff, and individuals that are selling, it's often taking the complex or the wordy or the clunky and turning it into something really streamlined, efficient, easy to remember, and more than anything, that stands out in the marketplace.
Yeah.
If you think about the idea of I'm Rob, I stack bricks, that can get incredibly visual.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing where you could do a video for TikTok or LinkedIn or something where you're literally stacking bricks. Mm-hmm. And, you get a little bit of money, you start getting them custom made with those words on it. And all of a sudden it becomes a thing. And so really more than anything, that's my job, is to put words to ideas that are often really, really, really big. And we need to make it nice and tidy and small. Mm-hmm. That makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense. So when we think about entrepreneurship and looking at new entrepreneurs, right? This is all about entrepreneurs and people looking to start new businesses and things. When you're starting to craft your idea and you have an idea, you have a pain, you're trying to solve it. Where does this begin? What is this journey that you do when we think about cumbersome and wordy and making it visual to stand for something? Where does that begin, or where does one start thinking about that in their entrepreneurial journey?
It's often hidden. It's one of those kind of things that people will see a problem or an opportunity and they'll try to go solve for it. And it might exist, but perhaps never have been fully identified or ever even communicated. And that is why? Why do this in the first place? We often can see how, and we definitely see what, but why can be hidden from view. And so more often than not, what my job is to do is just simply peel back what's already there to find this little kernel of gold, this version of why, and then turn that into something that people can wrap their arms around in statements that they go, I get that. It's always pretty much there, but you'd be surprised by how deeply covered and buried it can be. What's also interesting is there's some, both entrepreneurs and certainly leaders of other organizations who don't necessarily believe personally what the entity believes. Mm-hmm. And there's all of a sudden an incongruence. And when that happens, you have a real problem. That happens with more regularity than you think. Sometimes people will see dollar signs. Some people want the title, but more often than not, when that happens, you're going to see somebody depart. Someone's going to let go or quit. Congruence with the core beliefs of the firm as well as the individuals is huge, cannot be understated. But it's definitely one of those kind of things where the nugget is there. You just got to find it.
Yeah. Think back to some of the organizations I worked for and thinking about different core beliefs or values of those companies. And they made sense, but they never fully resonated. And you're like, wait a second, we say this, but how do we live this? How do we do this? And I do remember a company I worked for that it was basically their kind of thing was delight our customers or something to that point. And one thing I will say is that when I met the CEO down at training in Tampa, he actually lived that and every shape of the word. And I was like, wow, that makes sense. And I never really felt that in other organizations until I started my own business. And I realized that, and I realized what it means to live that. Because when you live that and you show that and you have it wordsmith out, then people can tangibly, you said congruently, tangibly understand why they do. One of the things that I was talking in another episode is that when you join a company, right? The company's mission is to do X, Y, Z, right? And this is a bigger thing than the needs of any individual, right? And so if we can't get all the individuals to understand what that impact does and what those core beliefs mean to the company's doing, you don't have employees bought in. And when you don't have employees bought in, then they're running the brand. And when running the brand, you're deteriorating your communication strategy, hence broken communication all around from everywhere.
Well said. And the best way I would describe this is, of course, these are not my words. This has been out long time, but the difference is really between a job, a career, and a calling. And the classic example, it's been around for decades, is the idea of the two bricklayers building a cathedral. One is laying bricks. The other is building this incredible place of worship. And so it's, one's a job, one's a career, one's a calling. Ideally, if you really deeply know as a founder, as a CEO, as a leader, what your firm stands for, what its core beliefs are, you can then transmit that to everyone else on the team. You can live that out in a truly authentic way. People can see that. They can agree with that. They can wrap their arms around that. They can join the calling. You can't give what you don't have. If you don't have it, you can't give it. And so if you're unable to put words to that calling, then you're only going to have people with a career or a job. And careers aren't a terrible thing. Lots of people have great careers, but it would be amazing if you had a whole group of people who were so invested, so deeply pulling in the same direction that money is the bonus, that if no pay was there, they'd still be doing the work. That's the difference between a career and a calling. A job, that's people who just kind of need the money. They could care less about whatever's going on. Those are the least desiresome type of employees. The difference between the three is real, and it's up to the senior leaders, the founders, the people in charge to figure out what the stuff is around the calling and then really translate that to the people in a way that makes sense. It's not difficult. You just have to do it. Okay. Yeah. It can be difficult, but you have to do it.
No, I love that. And I love this like theme of like stacking bricks. Just so visual, right? And it makes so much sense. Kind of looking at you, right? We made a comment early about
my pocket scarf.
No, the orange Lego, those are bricks, right? So we talk about communication is broken, and we were talking about these core beliefs. Another thing that's a big piece of a brand is it's outward facing, the colors of the brand, the way the brand is communicated. And so you chose orange I'm guessing for a very specific reason. I mean, you love your Bears and you got the blue suit jacket with the orange, the navy and orange. But what was it about orange and the Legos that brought together to build your brand and what SquarePlanet? Because SquarePlanet, it's 4 employees now, but if I'm not mistaken from what we've talked about before, you've done millions of dollars in revenue. You've never taken on debt. You've never needed investors. So you've built a true entrepreneurial journey from the ground up. So what is it about your brand and the colors and the bricks that really were built around, and why did you choose orange?
Yes, all that was very, very intentional. We were highly specific about what we did and why we did it. And we've done millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of commerce over all these years. I mean, it's real money. Even with relatively small teams, we've been able to be very consistently profitable and at a high level. I mean, things have been really, really good. 2020 was a kick in the pants, but for a lot of people. To your question though. So when we were building our brand, the notion of creating a variety of expressions, the words, the imagery, the colors, it was all part of the overall experience that we were building. As a presentation company, our job is to make sure that the work that we do on behalf of our clients is to help them stand out, to be noticed, to make a big dent in the universe. And orange is the color of contrast. If you think about things like orange traffic cones to signify a pothole or an accident or something, and even things like orange vests on hunters who go into the forest to hunt, they want to stand out from the background so they don't get shot by other hunters. Contrast. Orange was a very specific choice. Even things like the word SquarePlanet, that is actually a term from astrophysicists who, unlike a lot of other professions, if they encounter a problem that they can't solve, as opposed to keeping it close to the vest and saying, I don't know. They do the exact opposite. They go out to the world and say, I don't know. Anyone have a thought?
Yeah.
And that sort of notion was really compelling to us. There's so much of our brand that was very intentional. Legos was kind of a byproduct. My wife was trying to honor this new business and give me a little gift to say, go get them. And I wore French cuff shirts pretty regularly, so I liked Cufflinks. And she wanted something that was both orange and square. And the best thing she could find were Legos. They were like $9 on Etsy, cheap. And so once I got those from my wife, it kind of became a good luck charm. And then one thing led to another where people were like, are those Lego Cufflinks? They are. And we then added to the momentum by creating something called the Royal Order of the Orange Lego Cufflink. It's a royal order. And so essentially, if you go through the one-on-one training with me, which can be difficult, it's hard to get this kind of stuff, to make the fixes necessary because communications is so broken. But if you can survive, when you come out on the other end, you get a pair of orange Lego cufflinks, and plenty of ladies have them. Many a beautiful shirt maker for ladies exists that make French cuff shirts. It is definitely something for both genders, for all genders. And I'll tell you, people love their orange Lego cufflinks. They're pretty cool.
I love it too. I mean, I think it's such a cool thing. I mean, I'm a big cufflinks guy. I used to wear French cuff shirts all the time. And when I do still wear a suit, I prefer to wear a French cut because I love having a cufflinks. In fact, at my wedding, I had lion cufflinks because they were black and gold because I have gold jewelry, gold ring, everything. And for the groomsmen gift, many of my groomsmen had never worn a French cuff shirt before, let alone wear cufflinks. But I got them not custom. I found this really cool little shop called Curated Basics. And so they're all different animals or different things that represented their personality. Like one of my little brothers was like a bull because he's like a bull in a china shop. One was for my buddy who's a firefighter, American flags, was really patriotic. One was my brother who lifts a lot, were silverback gorillas. My brother Zach, who travels the world, in one of his favorite countries, Australia, got him sharks. My brother-in-law, who is quiet, but he's very like, he has that edge and flair that he knows how to like do things or do certain things, not to be flashy, but just sharp enough that he stands out. I got him pink elephants. So everyone had like a certain reason to it. And I just thought it was a sharp way to like show off all their personalities in such a subtle way.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. So I have a big attachment to cufflinks, and
let's do a tutorial then, Rob, because I would give this trick to anyone. The next time anyone listening needs to put on a French cuff shirt, here is the key to success. Before you ever put the shirt on, hang it up in your closet, sort of where the front of the shirt is facing away from you. So you're looking at the back of the shirt. It's the way you would wear it, right? And then what you do is you basically feed the cufflink through the first part of the shirt, not all the way through, just the first two parts. Then you put the shirt on, button your shirt as normal, and then you come in, you push through and flip, and bam, you got a French cufflink shirt on. So many people struggle because they try to put it on all like a normal shirt and they can't do it. But if you feed the first two sides while the shirt is hung, then everything changes. That is the key.
You know how I learned that lesson? I used to go to the gym every morning, and so I'd take the shirt and I'd always forget the cufflink. So I started the night before, I put the cufflink in the first two to hold it so that I would not forget the cufflinks every day. Cause I multiple days I forgot cufflinks. And I was like, oh, this is like the move. Cause when you put it on, they're already in there. It's really easy. I was like, oh, and I did that.
It's a lot like, remember when you would put your football jersey on the shoulder pads and then you put the shoulder pads on? It's that move. Same move.
It is. So that's how I learned that trick. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Cause putting them in, and I used to have like a little ball one. Yeah. Crazy. So it's so funny though, how these like little things about our lives tie us together. And I think, as we come to the back half of this and get into the final questions, one of the things that I have taken so much away from this is that we look across entrepreneurship and the businesses we're building, and it's to find the little things that tie us all together, the core beliefs, and then making those core beliefs visual and simple. And it's those little simple things that tie us together that brings that collective whole to the calling of the company, that brings everybody and elevates them one step further. Going back to your
clients, that's the stuff that's the magnetic pull. It's the stuff that all of a sudden they go, oh, I got to get me some of this. And so it's good for internal for sure, but it's brilliant for external.
See, I was just about to pull that too, is that once you have the internal when, because this is what my book about mastering your personal professional brand, when you have people pushing out their passion from what they do, their job, everything, that the return on that, the pull back in is so much that it's incredible. And,
Exactly.
and I love this. So I know we could talk for hours and I would love to just like riff on 100 different things, but I want to ask you is we look at entrepreneurial minded folks right now, Gen Z coming into the workplace, right? Changing the future of work, mission, impact, purpose are three big things Gen Z look for in jobs. Same thing with millennials. So as you're looking at future entrepreneurs that are stepping in ready to start business, what advice would you give them?
Whoa, that's a big question. I
Very
don't
big.
think this is generational at all. I would tell you that I think the number one piece of advice I would give anyone that is creating their own entity or leads an existing enterprise, whatever it is, I would say it's never stop marketing. I can tell you that in 2018, 2019, first part of 2020, first couple months of 2020, even 17 and 16, we were just sort of fat, dumb, and happy. I mean, I just had business coming at me like crazy. We were making money. I live in a big house. Life is good. And then all of a sudden I recognized in 2020 with COVID, we had millions of dollars in cancellations. And I'm looking at my pipeline and I'm going, oh shit. I have not done a good job of creating a lot of brand awareness outside my little scope. And so I think what I would do is if I could go back in time, the biggest lesson I would teach myself, but certainly others coming up, is once you start, never stop. And even if it's a single person on staff doing nothing more than some simple social media strategies, you should never stop marketing, no matter what. No matter how busy you are, no matter how successful you are, never stop marketing.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing you notice is if you stop talking, people just think you're no longer existing. So you need to keep that up. In fact, I read a book recently called The Hype Handbook by Michael Sheen. And I think we talked about it on your podcast, but this is, part of that is keeping hype and momentum all the time and really driving that forward because I believe in it. I mean, you need to keep that hype up.
To that end, and you'll know what I mean, Rob, if anyone's ever pushed a car that's at a dead stop, it's in neutral, that initial push is a lot harder than it is to keep it going, right?
Yeah.
Once you get it rolling, it's fairly straightforward. It's a little simple nudge, but that big push, that's where we're in 2020. Here we were looking at millions of dollars in canceled contracts, an unknown state of affairs, a world in complete turmoil, and we had to push uphill. It was a beast. And so, just to survive makes me pretty thrilled about where we're at. But now knowing that I think we're in position to thrive, but boy, if I could go back, it'd be a lot better to just simply nudge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really easy for us to quit doing that because we feel confident in what we're doing. It's always to keep pushing yourself, keep moving yourself in that direction. I love it. So what do you think your superpower is?
I would say there's an easy one. If I really had to stop and think about it, my ability to hear you or anyone else do their pitch, their presentation, I can in essentially real time, remember it, do it the right way, and regurgitate it properly, essentially instantaneously. And sometimes they're pretty complex. I mean, I do a lot of work in healthcare, in financial services, and in disruptive technology. And so all three of those verticals can be really complex stuff. And yet I've just been at this for so long that I know how to do it. I mean, we had 10 teams on Shark Tank. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients in large, medium, and small corporate entities working on their sales pitch, their overall pitch, people that have been raising money. I mean, you name it. And so I just have done this for so long that my superpower is that. Plus, I have a thing I'm called a quick start on a Colby index score. It's like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC, one of those things. I am off the charts fast. Like I get it super, super quick. Can get me in trouble in a lot of things, but when it comes to having someone do their pitch, it's a really good benefit. It's a heck of a lucky skill set. But I would say that's probably it, is my speed and ability to help people get it right.
I love that. I think that's really important, right? Speed and ability and being able to hear and take something complex and create it into I don't want to use the word simplistic in a negative way, but in a simple, easy to understand visual process.
No, it's not at all a negative thing. What we always talk about is creating what's called a parallel narrative, stacking bricks is a parallel narrative because people can in their mind visualize an actual brick wall of bricks being stacked. That's simple, but yet it's got deep complexity, and it really helps people understand the more complex thing, your beliefs. And so it's really specifically meant to be more simple, but it's done on a parallel trajectory. So people go, I get it. There's real science to that. But my whole life is about helping people create parallel narratives. It's what we do all day.
I love it. It sounds quite fun. Probably stressful, but quite fun.
So we are forced to always have to be creative, which is both fun and stressful. It's like, can I come up with something? Yeah, we'll come up with something.
So what is one book, resource, show, or piece of content that you would recommend right now?
Not mine. I'm not going to recommend my book, although I would, of course, want people to check it out. I would say that the most profound book that I have read, maybe ever, is a book called Reboot by Jerry Colonna. For any entrepreneur, anyone in a position of leadership, run, don't walk, get the book Reboot. Even the way it's written is so different than anything out there. I found myself getting incredibly emotional, very, very, very deep introspection. I needed my psychotherapist, executive coach wife a few times to help me. I talked to my therapist a few times and kind of said, get me off the ledge. Because, man, you start looking at your own life in a way that you just go, whoo, we all got something. Everyone's got something. Everyone's got something. And this book does a great job of, in some ways, making that okay. Great book.
I love it. I am going to get it ASAP because one of the cool things I love about this question is I have such an amazing list of recommendations now. And I read 10 pages a day, so I can get through things pretty quickly. But that one might have to just jump up the charts to be a quick read.
I'll tell you this, Rob. I do breakfast with my book every day. Like I have a morning routine, and part of it's I have a little seat where the book is. I mean, like it's very specific, right? The minute I finished Reboot, I started it right up again, back to back, because it was like, whoa, that was so deep. I got to go in for round 2 while it's still somewhat fresh. I mean, I read it back to back in the span of about 35 days, and it was a beast, but it was worth every second.
There's only one, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, the Hype Handbook was a book I did. I literally read it twice because there's so much that I like circled, noted, and was like taking away that I was like, I don't even remember what chapters 1, 2, and 3, what I was supposed to take away from. And I had to go back and reread to like put all this into just mental process. I love it. It's on my list. So, I always like to kind of leave this space. What is your lasting message that you want listeners to take away today?
Ooh, another good question. This is something that you and I have talked about in the past. I feel like it's reasons that we are brothers from another mother. Intentionality, no doubt about it. The notion that fuzzy targets are hard to hit is a really wise little saying. And I don't care if it's your own health and fitness, your own mental wellness, your financial goals, your travel and leisure goals, your long-term education goals, because life is about education until the day you die. And certainly your career aspirations. Intentionality is a big, big deal.
Yeah.
Everything that I do, every bit that I work on, everything that I help people with, all of our clients, it's really about helping them be more intentional in the words and the ideas that they proffer up to their constituency. And it's definitely something that the more you work on it in all aspects of life, the easier it gets. But it's really, really, really hard to be intentional. It really is. But when you start doing a few things with a very intentional mindset and you get some small wins, you get to reinforce quickly the power of that intentionality. Yeah. And it bleeds into so many other areas. This is ridiculous, but a few years ago, I had a very intentional goal about a chunk of money that I wanted to save. And it was one of these kind of things, I think I had like a 5-year goal. And I did it like a year and a half. not because it was some magic, I got these huge bonuses. It was just because I said, I'm going to be intentional about this. And 1 win became 2 wins, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. It compounded quickly.
Yeah.
And I nailed the goal way in advance because I was intentional. Mm-hmm. It's the number one thing, and I can't stop. It's on every whiteboard, it seems like, in my world right now. It's almost overtaking my life, but it matters. And so I would tell people, be intentional.
I love that so much. That's such a great lasting message. I think a great way to close this out when we think about everything we talked about, from your entrepreneurial journey to what you help others to do, to the advice that you'd give entrepreneurs about building their brands. So where can my listeners, where can Bear Nation find you? How can I get in touch if they want to learn more or connect with you?
I think the easiest thing is just check out our main website, which is SquarePlanet. I want you to think round earth. Just go to squareplanet.com. You can certainly check out Brian Burkhart on LinkedIn. I'm I think the only one in Phoenix. There's a bunch of Brian Burkharts, but if you just look for Brian Burkhart in Phoenix, you'll find me. And we're everywhere, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn when it comes to social things.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to have both of those links in the show notes so users can quickly check it out. And also what I'll do, because I like to do this, is I'll put your podcast link in there to go check out your podcast so that my listeners can also, when it comes out, check out my episode on Square Stories. And Brian, thank you so much for being a part of this today and chat with me. I know we could talk for another 3-4 hours, but really appreciate the insights, the thoughtfulness, the intentionality with what you shared today. And I know Bear Nation thanks you for being a part of it. So thank you so much, Brian.
Rob, it is my pleasure. Let's elevate people, including those beloved Chicago Bears. You're the best, Rob. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Brian. And Bear Nation, till next time, stay well. Bear Nation, once again, thank you for listening to the Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. And until next time, take care.